It is very nice to see you all here this morning, and we have gathered so that we can enjoy together the presence of God's Holy Spirit, who is the giver of every good and perfect gift. And I want to point to this light, which is already lit, and that's just to remind you that Christ's presence doesn't depend on us making a lighter go click, 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 but Christ's presence is always with us and always within us, even if by some circumstance there should be an eclipse, right? Sometimes in our lives, things happen and we are not able to get in touch with the Spirit of God. We can call that a little eclipse, a personal one. And the key thing is to hang in there. The thing will pass and the light will be revealed. So we are here to assure you that Christ's light in you will never fail you, even if circumstances aren't always just as you would like.
Lord, with a crashing cymbal, praise the Lord with the pipe and string. Praise the Lord with a joyful song to sing. Praise the Lord on a weekday morning. Praise the Lord on a Sunday noon. Praise the Lord by the light of sun or moon. Praise the Lord in the time of sorrow. Praise the Lord in the time of joy. Praise the Lord every moment. Nothing let your praise destroy. Praise the Lord in the peace and quiet. Praise the Lord in your work or play. Praise the Lord everywhere in every way.
I have to appreciate the phrase, for we know that all things are working together for the good of those who love God and are called according to God's plans, was the translation Marilyn had, but purposes is another translation. And I love the fact that no matter how we get along in church, how it might seem to somebody that we're not very polished and not very perfect, that none of that really matters. It's all working together for the good. And that is given to us as an encouragement. That is to say, no matter what is happening in our lives, we can be assured that the outcome will bring us benefits. Now, if you want a very, very easy example of this, there are texts in the Bible which speaks about a woman being in travail, that is to say, a woman who is in labor. And those moms and grandmas in here who have memories of bringing children into the world will understand that labor is a very difficult process sometimes. But it always requires quite a lot of both the mom and those who are helping her bring the child into the world. But the scriptures say that that labor, that travail, is worth it for that moment when the child is brought forward face to face with the mom. And she first time sees what has been growing and living inside her for a period of about 9 months. And so that's just a little illustration of how things that don't feel good can still work towards the good. Another example might be from any one of you who has undertaken any artistic or athletic endeavor. It demands something of you. You have to commit yourself to it. You have to work at it. And that means you have to make choices and turn away from some options to embrace other options. I was just talking to young Trudy at the beginning of the service prior to our start about her experience as a ringette player. And she spoke already at her young age of what this was requiring of her. But Trudy loves the game. And so she gladly pays the price to be a good ringette player. And then Trudy told me something that really blessed me, because not only is she growing into a good ringette player, but she signed on to become a coach of other ringette players, girls who are younger than herself perhaps. So here's an example for us of somebody who is paying the price of learning a skill and now beginning to communicate that skill to others. It's our opportunity to grow in the way of God, and in growing that way, we pay a price. We discipline ourselves, we exercise ourselves, but we do so for the outcome, which is blessing in us and through us. And by blessing, I mean good stuff. Now, Paul talks in his text about all of nature being in the condition of a pregnant mom, groaning, waiting for something to happen. And right now, nature is so stressed because what has been going on through human will and human desire. Nature is so stressed that it is groaning inside saying, oh, if only we could be free of all this which is crushing us and liberated into that which makes us truly beautiful and wonderful. So the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees don't talk the way we talk, but they have a spirit, and they with us are longing for things to be different. Now, I have always enjoyed in southeastern Manitoba seeing the sunflower fields. And this year we grew a sunflower in our backyard. In fact, we couldn't stop. Sunflowers were growing all over the place in our backyard because last year we'd been feeding birds. And so a lot of our work this summer was just keeping those sunflowers from growing in our grass, in our sandbox, in our flower beds. Life wants to grow, right? The life that's in you wants to grow. But we had one sunflower that we just kind of watched. I did in a particular way, and how it just was a seed, a tiny little thing. And it fell in the ground, and what it did there was die. It lost its nature as a seed. And it began to express a new nature. It began to put down a little tiny root and a little tiny branch. It grew deep into the source of its sustenance, its nourishment, and it grew up into its sustenance and nourishment. The sun, the air, the rain, the mud, all these things working together to produce this beautiful stalk, which grew and grew and grew. And as an observer, and perhaps you look at the sunflower fields or the corn fields or any of the other fields, farmers know things about this that I certainly don't know. But as the sunflower grows, it begins to form a head. And that head at first is so glorious to me. This beautiful, radiant yellow petals around this circle full of anticipation. And as the season goes on, we notice something that at first, especially if you have no history with agriculture, may puzzle us. The sunflower begins to go. And it begins to turn brown. And the leaves begin to crinkle and dry up. And we may go, oh no, this beautiful thing is dying. Except the farmer at the back of the room who says, woohoo, it's harvest time. Now the point I want to make is that the seed that we put in the ground there that grew up and became the head is now, that head is full of seeds. The one became many. And if you drive down the road, just going, say, down 52, or I don't think there's so many sunflowers down 12, but down 52 there is, and then down 59, you see acres of these plants with their heads bowed. So there are billions of seeds, right? Life is indomitable. That is to say, God has planned the sunflower plant so that it goes in this circle, and this circle has been going from the beginning of time, and we have every reason to suspect that it will continue to do so. That's how life works. It works that way in fish, it works that way in plants, it works that way in insects, and it works that way in human beings. Right now in this room, some of us are beginning to anticipate stepping across the horizon and joining our loved ones who have departed before us in that everlasting place which we can't see with our eyes. We can only experience through our faith. And as we go, I in particular, and I suspect you as well, we are encouraged by what we see in the very young among us. We see a new generation. We see a future. And this is a constant theme in the Bible. With Abraham and Sarah, they are barren. They don't have a child. And what that means symbolically is they feel that there's no future for them. But once God establishes that child in Sarah's womb, they know there's a future. And one of my favorite texts in the New Testament is when Jesus is brought to the temple, this little baby in his mom's arms. Yes, he was a little baby. He didn't flit around supernaturally and walk in his own steam. He was a little baby, exactly like all other little babies. But when they carried him into the temple, there was two folks who noticed. One was an elderly gentleman, and one was an elderly woman. And both of them, seeing the child, and I'm paraphrasing this, said, "We thought there was no future, but there is a future." Right now in history, we are going through a time of cloudiness, I can call it. We are not so sure about where this is all going. We might think of that exactly as we think of the sunflower beginning to bow its head. It appears that death is taking over. But the Spirit of God is quickening persons here, there, and everywhere, so that a new generation is rising up, which will walk through that valley of the shadow of death and come out on the other side, ready for a new creation. And that's what we want to participate in. We don't want to get caught up in the anxiety of what is going on and what it might mean for us. We don't want to get discouraged and dismayed by the way things are turning, but we want to be aware that God has a pattern, and in that pattern, death is included. But we know that death does not have the last word because of the resurrection. In the same way that a seed falls in the ground, our personalities fall in the ground when we die. But that seed rises up and our personalities rise up, and what we communicate to our young will go on. So what we hope to communicate is the life of God revealed in Jesus Christ. And that is not something religious. This is something deeply spiritual. And what it's trying to point us to is that deep within us, there is something that is purely belonging to God. It's God's life. And it's that life that was there when we were being formed in the womb. It's that life that's there as we grow. But that life sometimes gets hidden by circumstances so that we begin to feel that we're alone and without resources to deal with the hardships of life. And I called the talk this morning In Touch with the Source, is that I hope each one of you, through your faith, will know that there's something very good within you. Something precious. Something for which your family and your friends and your neighbors are hungry. The love of God. And I simply am asking you and encouraging you to, as much as possible, get in contact with that deep inner life, which is the presence of God within you in the name of Jesus Christ. And as you get in touch with that life, no matter what circumstance does, you can say, but this, my true identity, is indestructible. It's light. And no matter how deep the dark gets, it can't put that light out because it's the light of God. So we are gathered. I'm looking at the clock. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, George, you're getting tired of talking. It's only 10 minutes after 11. But one of the lovely things about God's grace is the clock is not the boss. Right? And that's one of the areas in life where we get lost sometimes. We begin to be driven by these external constraints, clocks and calendars and appointment books, and we begin to lose touch with that peaceful place within us. Therefore, we gather together to worship. But more than gathering together for worship, we also cultivate the habits of being in communication with God. A fair, beautiful day. Thank you, God. And you don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to show off in front of your non-Christian friends like this. You can do it in a quiet place. Just express gratitude within yourself. And that gratitude will radiate in the same way that little candle radiates, and it will bless people. So we are at a point in our life as a congregation. I'm certainly at a point where I think the question of prayer is becoming important. We've had a prayer group started. There's been some very nice turnout. There's been about a dozen persons at least, twice now. And at first, what they have told me is that they're kind of figuring out, how do we do this? And as they figure that out, as they begin to work together, that prayer group should begin to be able to give us some insights about how we might work at becoming a praying people. And I will suggest that it's worth our while, because there are many, many things you can do to overcome anxiety. But the very best thing you can do is to pray. To just get in touch with the source of your life, which is indestructible. And I will say amen there.